So in my last video, I talked about the identity trap of motherhood and how it's really a cultural setup that sets us up for feeling like we lose ourselves and no longer know who we are. And so I want to talk a little more today about early motherhood and the identity death in early motherhood that we could say happens, right? I hear from so many women, and felt myself when I was a new parent, that I really just lost myself and didn't really know who I was anymore, because all of the things that define you in that period, or everything that defined you before you became a mother, kind of collapses all at the same time, right? You lose your autonomy, your bodily autonomy in a way, when there's a baby on you a lot. You lose your time sovereignty and your real control over your own time, your professional identity, perhaps sexual identity, now that you've just given birth, and your body, your breasts are making milk. So that changes sort of the sexual dynamic and your sexual desire and role for a while. And just the ability to have uninterrupted thought. At any moment, thoughts are interrupted. And if you've ever had a conversation with a group of mothers, it's really hard to complete a thought. So today, that quote unquote death of identity is real, right? It's a real psychological and spiritual threshold, identity threshold that we cross. And, yet we pretend that it's exhaustion. And that's all it is, right? We just need more sleep. Just sleep when the baby sleeps. And that as a mother, we must now be automatically fulfilled and blissed out, even though we're tired, right? So that process of becoming a mother, or matrescence, if you've seen any of the recent posts on social media or the ad in the New York Times recently about the term matrescence, which is the physical, psychological, and spiritual process of becoming a mother, right? It's related to adolescence, in that same term, that it's a process, it's a phase of profound change, profound hormonal shifts. And matrescence is the same thing. It's this process of becoming the mother that was initiated when that baby came to you, right? It's not poof, you're a mother. Well, you're a mother now, but your identity as a mother and as yourself as a mother is a process that's continues to grow and change throughout your parenting journey, right? Because as your child grows and changes, you grow and change as a mother. And so, like I said, everything that had defined you before disappears kind of all at once. Life is radically different, right? And so something collapses at that point, and usually in some kind of initiation kind of process, traditional cultures, initiatory sort of groups and processes and traditions, there's often a rebirth, death precedes rebirth, right? So who you are at a certain point does in fact die in order to be reborn as your new self, right? But becoming a mother can literally feel like dying, and no one tells us that. Maybe not dying physically, though that could certainly be, depending on your birth story. But in terms of the identity of self, it can feel like you're dying psychologically in that early time and in that process of sort of finding your way. But without that sort of ritual tradition, and we don't really have any kind of cultural acknowledgement and process of initiation into motherhood, we're just sort of left to our own devices, and off you go. Here you are. See you in 6 weeks, and now be the perfect parent. Yeah. And so we feel like we're failing. It shows up as anxiety, as a depression, as just exhaustion. Yes. And that there's weakness, that there must be something wrong personally, but actually there's nothing wrong. You're just in transition, and transitions are messy, right? Transitions are uncomfortable because we're not who we were, and we're not who we're going to be. We're not who we're becoming yet, and we may not even know who that is. And so it's a process, and I urge you to give yourself grace through that process and to not be isolated, right? I saw a post on Facebook about first-time mom-to-be who's having a baby this summer, and she's trying to gather other parents around her that are also due this year to support each other. And so by having important people in our lives and other new parents and other parents at any stage in our life, that kind of helps reflect back to us in a way, and to know that you're not in it alone, because there's other people who know and who are experiencing that. And when your identity is not really integrated, because it's easy to just sort of not pay attention to that and focus on the doing rather than the being of motherhood, right? You may not know who you are, and then your kids are grown and you're like, oh my God, who am I now? You know? And often if the identity is not integrated, then that can often resurface at midlife, either as a resentment, there can be grief over your life, or a desperate desire to really reclaim the self. I've found several people in that space where after all the parenting and then their kids are growing and about to become independent, and then they're like, where the hell did I go? Right? And so this identity shift and death and rebirth doesn't mean that you're losing yourself forever, even though I know it feels that way. Right? Because it could just be the beginning of meeting yourself more fully and more honestly than ever before. Okay? I read all the books, and I had some mamas around me when my son was a baby. And that was a beautiful thing and was very anchoring, right? But then we moved. We were in Austin and then moved to Dallas. And then a few years later, we moved to Colorado, where I am now. And it's hard to find that community. Without the community, you can feel even more lost, right? Isolated and not quite knowing who you are. And then it's hard to find your people when you don't know who you are. Right? And that's where I found it so informative and anchoring to myself when I found first Waldorf education for my son, because it really aligned philosophically of how I wanted to be as a parent, and I hadn't been able to put words to that. So that helped inform sort of my parenting philosophy, which then I could build on that to do those things. And who do I need to be in order to be this kind of parent, right? And then when I found human design, oh my goodness, then I was just like, oh, here's the blueprint of who I've come here to be, and how I'm designed to move through the world, and how my energy tends to work best. And learning my son was how he's designed and what he needs, what his energetic needs are, and that I hadn't been meeting them quite right. Parenting is hard, but there was much less struggle once I understood more about why I was the way I was, and how different he was when I understood how he really is, and I could accept him and hold space for that. And so while I had a good sense of myself as a parent, it took me a long time to realize that there was a layer of myself that I had been kind of hiding from, right? And however we were raised and experienced, how we were parented, informs our parenting, right? And so what is it in you, perhaps, that is hidden? What part of your childhood journey, or the way you want to parent in the world, and maybe the ways that you've been conditioned in the way you should be, right? That may not be your actual self. When you're parenting someone, when you're the mama bear, helps to strip away some of those shoulds, right? There's still plenty of shoulds that culture tries to pile on top of us, right? But the love of your child and the process of parenting in this world really requires us to shake off those shoulds and step into our real identity, right? And so I'll be talking more about motherhood and initiation, how parenthood blends nicely with human design and Waldorf education, and just realizing I didn't introduce myself, right? So if we haven't met before, I'm Julie Bankin, and my work meets at the intersection of Waldorf philosophy, human design, conscious parenting, and my own lived experience. Yeah. And so down in the description, there is a link to get a free parent human design chart, a tool to help ground you in the identity of who you are and who you've come to be as the soul that incarnated as you and as a parent on this earth. You can click that link and it will take you to my free human design chart. And I look forward to spending time with you again. Thank you. Blessings on your journey. Bye.